In a recent interview, Joni Lamb revealed something shocking that left followers inconsolable and incensed. She didn't just say anything surprising while on live camera. People began to doubt everything they believed to be true about her because of it. Within minutes, supporters' demands for answers and even for her resignation erupted in comments. Did Joni make a mistake, or did she disclose her actual self-support? Come along as we dissect what actually transpired. On Christian television, Joni Lamb established a carefully manicured persona that evoked trust for years, serving as a symbol of faith and family. As she talked about honesty, hope, and living in accordance with God's plan, viewers at home were able to relate to her kind, assured demeanour. However, all of that began to shatter when startling accusations surfaced, upending the fundamental basis of the reputation she had worked so hard to preserve. It began when Joni's own relatives, Jonathan and Susie Lamb, came out to allege that there had been domestic abuse and that it had been concealed to preserve the Lamb family's good name. There was more to this than mere internet whispers. These were grave accusations, including damage to Joni's grandchild, who asserts that the family decided to remain silent in order to preserve their reputation rather than pursue justice. This news was a shock to fans who had relied on Joni for years, viewing her family as a symbol of faith and solidarity. Those who formerly regarded Joni as a spiritual leader began to wonder, how could this have occurred while she was in charge? How could she teach about faith while ignoring her own family's pleas for assistance? The police quickly became involved, transforming what had been a private family concern into a public investigation that Joni was no longer able to manage. The specifics of the probe were unknown at the time, but Joni's reputation suffered right after. Doubt and uncertainty now eclipsed Joni's reputation as a strong, devoted mother and leader. Nor was her response helpful. Joni rejected the accusations, calling them untrue, and accused Jonathan and Susie of attempting to destroy the family rather than admitting the suffering in her family and confronting the accusations head-on. People became even more suspicious as a result. Many people thought she was hiding something because of her dismissive demeanor and lack of candor. Individuals who had trailed her devotedly started to perceive her in a new light, wondering whether the Joni they saw on screen was the same person in real life. Commenters on social media expressed feelings of confusion, hurt, and betrayal. Instead of the answers they sought, they got carefully crafted remarks that steered clear of the case's specifics. Many believed Joni was more concerned in maintaining her reputation than pursuing the truth or mending her family's wounds. The questions became more pressing as the police inquiry went on. Once moved by Joni's sentiments, viewers were now doubting whether they were sincere. Could someone genuinely talk about forgiveness, faith, and family while letting such evil persist in their own home? Many were compelled by the accusations to reevaluate their backing for Joni, resulting in a distinguish between the reality that is currently taking place and the image she portrayed. It was more than a controversy. People's perceptions of Joni Lamb were irrevocably altered by that moment. Her decades-long trust was now in jeopardy, and the group of people who had formerly supported her started to distance themselves in anticipation of the truth that Joni appeared reluctant to reveal. The sadness for many wasn't only about what transpired in the family, it was also about recognizing that the spiritual leader they had faith in could not have been as open as they thought. People's faith in Daystar's mission allowed it to flourish for years. With the hope that they were assisting in the spread of God's word, donors sent in checks and made online contributions every day, feeling like they were a part of something greater than themselves. Alongside her, Joni Lamb, people were led to assume that every dollar was being used to help others by the kind smile and inspirational remarks about faith. Viewers felt proud to support what they believed to be an integrity-based cause, and churches that collaborated with Daystar Ministries trusted it as a safe environment. However, when suspicions started to circulate regarding the true behind-the-scenes use of monies, that trust began to erode. It began modestly with rumors on social media that donations weren't going to the causes that are portrayed on television. Then rumors started to circulate regarding Joni's personal spending, travels, and way of life. Donors who had previously been eager to contribute started to wonder, where did my money actually go? They started to notice things they hadn't before. Joni's pricey clothing, her travels, and the lifestyle she led were all linked to allegations that ministry funds were connected to her personal life, including her abrupt remarriage to Doug Weiss following Marcus Lamb's death. The modest, devout persona she displayed on television no longer matched the one she displayed on social media. While requesting donations, some people started to feel deceived after making selfless sacrifices to assist Daystar, such as foregoing family vacations or cutting back on spending. There were also questions about the time frame. Joni's marriage to Doug, along with an extravagant lifestyle, came shortly after Marcus Lamb's death. Honeymoon and vacation pictures that made a lot of people uncomfortable. The inquiries evolved into calls for transparency when records emerged that revealed ministry credit cards were used on her personal trips. Individuals were curious in the proportion of their gifts allocated to ministry as opposed to personal indulgence. Daystar attempted to reply with evasive remarks, claiming that the accusations were untrue and that the ministry was still working. However, these answers simply infuriated the donors. They were against prepared statements. They want accountability and unambiguous responses. Many started demanding reimbursements for what they saw to be misuse of their donations by calling the ministry directly, sending letters, and even posting on social media. As former contributors posted their testimonies online, claiming to have donated hundreds of dollars, the outcry increased. Over the years, thinking they were assisting with the construction of churches, providing funding for missions, and sharing the gospel. They now believed that their money had been used to support a way of life that they would never be able to support on their own. The straightforward, faith-filtered image that viewers believed they were supporting was in stark contrast to images of Joni at upscale events, wearing pricey clothes, and traveling first class. As these tales circulated, some contributors started reaching out to attorneys to inquire about the possibility of recovering their contributions, considering them as if they were investments made under false pretenses. Donors organized online groups to exchange resources and write letters requesting that Daystar publish a comprehensive audit that would reveal the precise expenditure of every dollar, particularly during the time after Marcus' passing and Joni's second marriage. Churches that previously collaborated with Daystar to raise money also began retreating and recommending that their congregations hold off on making gifts until they had definitive answers. In order to avoid having their identities associated with a network that was subject to such intense financial scrutiny, ministries that broadcast on Daystar surreptitiously began to discontinue their programs. This was disastrous for a trust-based network. The pressure was also felt by Daystar's employees behind the scenes. Morale declined as concerned about their reputations being associated with the controversies. Some workers started searching for new positions as the queries became more frequent. As the leadership attempted to handle the situation, meetings became contentious. However, the annoyance was further increased by Joni's refusal to offer a comprehensive, transparent financial breakdown. Joni used spiritual expressions, such as, "God's plan will prevail," and framing instead of openly addressing the issues. The retaliation as enemy attacks. While some may have found solace in these remarks, many saw them as a way to shirk responsibility, utilizing faith as a shield rather than confronting the difficult problems head-on. Media sources started looking into Daystar's financial practices as the pressure mounted. When journalists contacted former workers, they acknowledged that there were issues with the way monies were handled, but they stated they were frequently silenced when they attempted to ask internal questions. The demands for financial transparency became a serious dilemma for Joni Lamb as a result of these disclosures, which increased mistrust. Daystar's standing as a leader in faith-based media started to deteriorate. Although the network made an effort to continue as usual, viewers saw that when ministries withdrew, the content changed. Comments were all over social media. From viewers who wanted to know what was going on behind the scenes and why their favorite shows were departing. It was made worse by Joni's silence. Donors started to view their contributions differently, recognizing that what they believed to be promoting religion might instead be supporting their own way of life. Many stopped giving money to the network until they received definitive answers. Getting money back wasn't the only reason for the refund requests. They were an appeal for responsibility, truthfulness, and moral rectitude from a ministry that had begged for their confidence. Many were further alienated by Joni's public persona during this period, which consisted of evasive remarks and spiritual catchphrases. She felt mistreated and disregarded by those who had stood by her for years. Their sincere worries were seen as assaults, instead of chances for openness. The circumstance became cyclical. Trust was eroded as Joni made greater efforts to shield her reputation without resolving the issues, which sparked more criticism and demands for openness. This money dispute turned into a crisis that defined Daystar and Joni Lamb. Rumors and accusations were no longer the only topics. It concerned the breakdown of trust that had been established over many years. Donors, ministries, and viewers who had previously supported Joni started to distance themselves from a network that would not give straightforward, honest answers. The harm was done, and many people would find it difficult to regain their previous level of trust in Joni Lamb. The group that formerly regarded her as a leader of faith was now calling for humility, openness, and accountability. They were no longer able to support the cause they formerly had such a strong belief in without it. For many years, Daystar was regarded as a reliable venue for Christian leaders, pastors, and ministries to spread their messages over the globe. It was a place where ministries felt secure, where God's word was spoken every day, and it felt like family, being certain that their lessons were in capable hands. By standing next to churches and ministries and urging viewers to tune in, donate, and support the cause, Joni Lamb had established herself as the spokesperson for that trust. However, that trust started to erode as the scandal surrounding Joan and Daystar intensified. It began gently at first. A few ministries started to stop using Daystar to broadcast their shows, giving, such as new routes or adjustments to the schedule. Although it appeared innocuous, there was genuine terror concealed beneath those courteous remarks. Ministries began to understand that if they didn't take immediate action, their own reputations may suffer from being linked to Daystar. Viewers began to notice as well, questioning why certain programs were dropping from the list or why this pastor's show was no longer airing. Daystar was now viewed as a risk by ministries that had previously viewed it as a collaborator in sharing the gospel. They were receiving messages from their own supporters and funders, requesting an explanation for their continued affiliation with a network embroiled in personal and financial crises. Pastors and ministry leaders were having difficult talks with their teams behind the scenes. They were aware that fans may react negatively if they continue to air on Daystar, doubting their moral character for continuing to use a platform that has come under fire for claims of financial abuse and problems with leadership. Spiritually, some leaders believed they could no longer be linked with Daystar. Timeouts, breaks, integration sessions, and weekly meetings were incompatible with the quickly evolving times, even if there were still a lot of unanswered questions. As additional ministries departed, the trend became evident. There were more than a few shows scattered here and there. In an attempt to safeguard their ministries and reputations, a number of reliable voices withdrew. Joni made an effort to keep the network operating normally by hosting shows and projecting confidence while on the air. However, viewers sensed the shift. The series that were replaced by reruns made the programming seem leaner, attracted devoted audiences. As ministries withdrew, Daystar's reputation continued to suffer. Every departure served as a subliminal message to the audience that something was amiss and that reliable leaders were no longer prepared to support Joni. The public became increasingly curious about what was actually going on behind the scenes at Daystar as more ministries left, even as the scandals persisted. Additionally, churches that had collaborated with Daystar for broadcasting and fundraising opportunities started to reevaluate their partnerships. Some pastors suggested rerouting cash to other ministries with more transparent accountability, while others cautioned their congregations against making gifts to the network. This change was disastrous for a network that relied on donations and confidence. Joni. During this period, the tactic was to avoid discussing the problems and instead rely on statements about faith and tenacity rather than actually addressing the issues. Instead of addressing the legitimate concerns expressed by ministries, contributors, and viewers, she would portray the problems as spiritual battle when she appeared on broadcasts discussing how to remain resilient in the face of attacks. However, ministries weren't content with ambiguous pledges. They desired responsibility and openness. And they decided to leave when they didn't understand. The decision was agonizing for several pastors who had known Joni, but they felt they had no other option. Loyalty to Daystar had to be subordinated to safeguarding their congregations and the integrity of their ministry. The atmosphere at Daystar grew strained behind the scenes. Employees were under pressure as the roster dwindled and meetings became more heated as bosses attempted to determine how to restore the missing content. Concerned about their personal reputations, some workers discreetly began searching for other employment because they didn't want to be associated with a network that was quickly losing credibility. Those who had been watching Daystar for years were profoundly affected by the changes. They missed the range of worship services and lessons that had previously filled the timetable. Concerns and queries abound on social media as viewers wonder what's going on at Daystar and why so many ministries are departing. Viewers felt neglected and mistreated as a result of Joni's silence, which only made the situation worse. Viewers were also informed that the controversies were serious by the ministry's departures. If dependable leaders felt compelled to depart, viewers began to wonder if they should donate or keep watching. It started a cycle. Viewers retreated, donations decreased, and Daystar's standing worsened as ministries departed. This was a crushing blow to Joni. Her platform was based on connections with ministries, which she used to increase Daystar's visibility and legitimacy. To lose those relationships was to lose the affection of. Why so many people felt that Daystar was trustworthy. Additionally, it meant losing the audiences those ministries brought with them, which would lower viewing and the associated funding. Joni dug back on avoiding specifics, assuming that if she ignored the storm long enough, it would pass, rather than taking this opportunity to address the concerns and restore trust. But the devastation increased every week. Ministries kept departing. The viewers who used to tune in every day started to leave, and donors kept demanding explanations. What might have been an opportunity for Joni to show her humility and dedication to openness turned into a leadership crisis. It was no longer safe for ministries that had previously supported Daystar's mission to be affiliated with the network. They observed Joni framing, while disregarding the difficult issues that they and their supporters required answered, portraying herself as a victim being attacked. This went beyond simple programming adjustments. It has to do with the breakdown of trust that had been established over decades. Ministries departed because they felt compelled to do so in order to preserve the integrity of their work and the confidence of their followers, not because they wanted to. Many found leaving to be sad. However, they thought it was essential. Daystar found it difficult to fill the voids as the list of ministries leaving increased, turning to internal content and replays. The network lost its energy when ministries from all over the world joined together to express messages of faith and hope, and viewers sensed the difference. Ultimately, the ministry's withdrawal from Daystar served as a stark reminder that the issues were too significant to ignore. The weight of unresolved issues and a failure to honestly address problems caused the once solid collaborations to fall apart. It served as a reminder to viewers that when accountability and openness are compromised, even the most reliable platforms can fail. Furthermore, Joni Lamb saw the ministry's retreat as more than just a loss of programming. It was evident that her leadership had not been able to safeguard the very connections that had shaped Daystar into what it was, leaving a platform that was broken and a community that wondered whether it would ever be able to trust her again. Many thought she would come forward modestly and answer the important issues when the controversy surrounding Daystar and Joni Lamb erupted. They anticipated that she would address the accusations, donor worries, family conflicts, and the ministry's retreat in a straightforward manner. People received a defensive wall, well-chosen language, and a leader who appeared more interested on preserving her reputation than confronting the harsh realities. Joni's public position was to portray herself as the victim of attacks as soon as suspicions began to surface. She presented the criticism as spiritual warfare, implying that the enemy was attempting to prevent her from carrying out God's will rather than genuine concerns. During interviews and live, usually, she would talk in a composed manner, her tone abrasive when difficult questions arose, returning the focus to her religious journey and sacrifices rather than details. People would watch in the hopes of learning more about the financial disputes and claims of financial mismanagement. Joni would then shift the topic to her years in ministry and the sacrifices she and Marcus had made for Daystar. She used tales about her family and beliefs to build a wall around herself, relying largely on her background to remind people why they had trusted her in the first place. While it was consoling to some, it seemed to many that she was evading responsibility. Joni would dismiss the rumors of ministry monies being spent for personal travel and the hasty remarriage to Doug Weiss as lies intended to defame anyone who inquired about them. Ignoring the time frame that demonstrated how rapidly she moved on after Marcus' death, she would assert that her acts were blessed and that she was carrying out God's purpose. Viewers were left feeling irritated and suspicious as she never provided definitive answers regarding whether donor funds were used for personal needs. When Jonathan Lamb's leaked tapes came to light, he expressed worries about Joni's handling of her family and Joni's reaction was contemptuous. Ministry issues. She portrayed herself as above the drama by claiming that she didn't watch videos that spread misinformation or listen to rumors. But it was clear that her team was keeping an eye on everything that was being said online, creating answers, controlling the damage, and removing and blocking offensive remarks from her platforms. The inconsistency was obvious. She stated that she didn't focus on the critiques, but her behavior demonstrated that she was acutely conscious of them. She hid behind spiritual platitudes, implying that people who questioned her were instruments of the enemy attempting to undermine her, rather than confronting these problems directly and transparently. She used religious terminology to divert attention from pressing issues, saying things like, "The enemy doesn't attack unless you're doing something right, and God knows my heart." This was tough to witness for folks who had been Daystar fans for years. They had relied on Joni as a spiritual guide who advocated honesty and loyalty, but when it counted most, they watched her shirk responsibility. Many felt humiliated by the defensive stance, as though their legitimate worries were being written off as pointless or malevolent attacks. Every time Joni shared inspirational quotes or words of faith on social media, the viewers would leave comments inquiring about the accusations, calling for donor fund transparency, and wondering why so many ministries were abandoning Daystar. Many comments were removed, and persons were blocked, rather than addressing these issues. This led to a feeling of censorship and increased the annoyance of supporters who felt disregarded. This protective posture had an impact on the network's atmosphere and Daystar employees behind the scenes. As scandals increased, employees sensed the stress, and some discreetly sought other employment because they did not want to be associated with a company that was losing credibility. Because the leadership was unable to discuss problems honestly, it was hard to make plans for the future, which caused morale to decline and team discussions to focus more on survival than growth. Additionally, churches that had previously collaborated with Daystar started to break ties with them, cautioning their members about gifts and raising concerns. If the network's initial goals were still being met, prayerful decisions were cited by ministries that left Daystar, but the fundamental cause was obvious. They didn't want to be linked to a platform that was being criticized for moral and financial issues. Joni's handling of the difficulties became a case study of what not to do when trust is destroyed, even though its leader declined to explicitly address the problems. People didn't require well-chosen tales or spiritual catchphrases. They required accountability, transparency, and honesty. They needed to hear Joni admit the suffering in her family, the donors' worries, and the ministry's departure. Rather, they received spiritual framing and deflection that suggested Joni was shielding herself from criticism by utilizing her faith. The longer Joni, the more these problems were avoided, the more harm was done. Once daily viewers start to drift away because they can't make sense of the defensive posture they witnessed and the portrayal of faith and integrity. After years of consistent giving, donors started shifting their funds to other ministries they believed to be more open and reliable. Daystar and its people became increasingly estranged, resulting in wounds that would be challenging to recover from. When ministries left Daystar, it became evident to the people that something was amiss. Additionally, many viewers' concerns were verified each time Joni declined to address the actual problems. The disputes had evolved beyond simple accusations. They dealt with a leader's crisis management. Additionally, Joni's decision to prioritize preserving her reputation over attending to her fans had a lasting impression on her heritage.